Motherlode, I was an addition to Motherlode, so Motherlode was pretty much formed when I joined. I got in there kind of on a fluke. I was playing with another local guy who is quite the legend, Donnie Miller, and with Paul Berrien, and who was the Motherlode drummer when I went in. But he and I were playing with Donnie Miller, and that's a long story, but basically Donnie, that was after Donnie just gotten off of CBS Records, and he literally couldn't be on the band flyers or anything because he had like one of the first 360 deals with Sony CBS, and so like the guy couldn't be on flyers or anything. And I was like, I had bought his record, so that was like a surreal moment playing this dude's band. But then he's like, oh, I can't be on the flyers, I can't play here, I can't do this. And I'm like, well, then where can we play? He's like, because they'll come after me for money. So anyways, long story short, Paul got an opportunity to audition for Motherlode. He's like, hey, I'm going to go play with this band, try out for this band Motherlode, you should come with me. So he told them he was bringing me, and they had no intentions, they already had a bass player. But I learned a couple of the songs, and we went over, and their bass player actually wasn't there, so they gave me a shot. They actually were like, dude, we weren't looking for a bass player, but you're in. So that's how I got there. Sweet. And that was a big, Motherlode was a wake-up call into really the work ethic. We worked hard. That band rehearsed 4 nights a week, 3-4 hours a night, non-stop. Lots of Keystone, Jägermeister, and playing. And we were a machine. It was great. I loved playing in that band. I learned a lot. And the Load Point Pull, I was in the Baloney Ponies. Frankie was friends with those guys and coming back in from LA. At first he was just stopping in here and there. And I knew Frankie from, he was one of my idols from back then as well. I saw Fortress at this, I think it was like a horse arena or something when I was young. And it was like giant field party / I don't know if you ever saw Fortress back then, but they were like the rock stars. I saw them on when MTV first came out, they had commercials on MTV, and I'm like, whoa, these dudes are from Kansas City, man. And Frank had such a huge voice and was, the larger than life as well. So anyways, he started showing up and hanging out, and he and I started talking, and we really hit it off. And I'm like, hey man, I like to do original stuff too. Do you ever do any original stuff anymore? And he's like, I'd love to do some original stuff. So we started getting together, he'd come in town a little bit, and we started working on some songs, and one thing led to another, and man, we're at it 30 years later. So we've had a great working relationship all these years. He's like a brother to me.
The first band that I formed when I came to Kansas City was the Romeo Slam, and that was with my girlfriend's brother, Bobby Odell. He brought in Dusty Blakestead. At the beginning, we had, for a while, I think we rehearsed once with Rick Vinoya from Foxy, because at that time he wasn't in Foxy, they got a new drummer. And Brian Kibler, the guitar player. So it was just us for a little while. And then Rick left, and we got Ethan Watts, who was a great drummer. And then things didn't work out with Ethan, and then we finally got Joey Clotter. And it was weird because remember that City Spark thing we used to do here? right? And they let you play on the radio, and it was kind of like a battle of the band thing. Well, our drummer couldn't make it to the studio session. And we had already been kind of talking to others. It was kind of a problem. So we've already been kind of talking to other drummers. We called Joey Clotter the day before and said, can you come play on this demo? And he had never played a note with us on stage. And he came down and played every note and killed it. Just absolutely killed it. So he was in the band, obviously. So it Bobby Odell, Brian Kibler, Dusty Blakestead, Joey Clotter, and that was the Romeo Slam.
Sons of Rex were formed probably 87, probably 86, 87. And since we were from St. Joe, we played a lot more in like Iowa, Nebraska. That's where we played a lot in Lincoln, Omaha. All those bars up around in there, South Dakota. And then we started playing more in Lone Star, Shadow, Hurricane, getting into Kansas City. And that went on for a few years. And that band, I played guitar and sang. And Scotty was a drummer. And what we would do is, first set would be original stuff. Second set, he would play guitar and sing, and I'd play drums. Third set, it would be, because back in the day, Lone Star, you'd play 9:30 to 2:30, or 9 to 2:30, 5 sets. So I'd play drums, he'd sing, then he'd play drums, I'd sing, and then we'd like split the last set, just to make it through the night. And we'd play a lot in St. Louis, down on the Landing, all those bars. You would play 4 or 5 nights a week for 5-hour sets with 30-minute breaks, 9 to 2:30. And, you get tight and get your chops up doing that stuff. And that was going on, and it just kind of got, this is getting little, I don't think anything's going to happen with it. And Charles and Norm from Shooting Star and Bill moved to LA in the band called Toledo Waltz, and they didn't have a drummer. So I'm like, hey, I'll move out and play. And they're like, come out. It's not a guaranteed thing, but you can come try out. So I did it, and it worked out. And we played for a while, and was doing showcases, trying to get a deal, and it just didn't happen. I was doing studio work and playing on bands' records, and played on a record, and they said, I think their drummer got mad that I played on the record, and their A&R guy called me and said, hey, you want to join the band? And they're looking for a guitar player. So I said, yeah. And Bill from Toledo Waltz, I asked him, he's like, let's do it. So we did it, did a couple tours, and then Bill and I started writing some songs together, and we demoed. The first demo in LA, we did it at 4th Street Recording in Santa Monica, which is Jim Wirt from a band called Fool's Face. It was from Springfield, but everybody thought they were going to get a big deal, but it never happened. But they were a killer band, and we recorded, and Norm played bass on it. That was from Shooting Star, which now Norm is in the Elders. It's an Irish band from here that play all over the world, and we did Welcome. I think the first 3 songs we demoed, all 3 were on our first record too. It was Welcome, Sincere, and Nowhere Man. All 3 of those, that was the first, we demoed those, moved back to Kansas City. We did a logo that was the Hot Wheels logo, and got back here. And then of course, Beezer's band had a Hot Wheels logo, Venus Auto. So it was like, okay, real quick, change all that. And hooked up with Brad. We tried a couple of bass players and met up with Brad, and we're like, let's do this. So we started writing a lot of songs. So that was probably 90, late 94, I think, early 95 probably. And we had those 3 songs, and we wrote probably like 4 more songs before Brad got in the band. And then we hooked up with Brad through a high school buddy of Bill's that knew Brad from wherever you said they went, north. Yeah, northwest.
No.
North.
Brad.
Yeah, and came over and we played and was like, yeah, this guy's good. And Bill's like, yeah, but he wears his bass up too high. So every practice I would just lower his strap a little bit every practice until it got down, like, because he was, one of these guys. But amazing bass player and singer, and was like, this is a good fit. And I think we played our first gig in 2 weeks. Like, the Hurricanes like, hey, it's daylight savings time. We need another band. Come and play. And we're like, all right. So we learned a couple covers and had like 7 originals, I think. And it just went fast. Really, like, super fast. That demo got out to some people. We went and played South by. We played North by Northeast in Toronto. We played there was some big music fest in St. Louis, and we played at Mississippi Nights, and that's where our A&R guy saw us and was like, hey, I want to sign you guys. And, we had a lot of labels come to see us and take us out to dinner, and, just none of them were, it's just a weird business. You just don't know. And then our A&R guy got dropped. Mercury got bought by Seagram's. We'd already had our option renewed to do a second record. So when Seagram's bought Mercury and they dropped all the bands, they had to pay us. So we were one of the few bands that didn't, get dropped on the label a bunch of money because they'd renewed our option. So they gave us a check and said, see ya. And I think that's what my down payment of my house was made with. And we were like, what are we gonna do? We did it a little while longer, than we all figured, we're all probably gonna start families. And we just kind of, decided to call it quits probably, I don't know when that was, maybe 98.
So you crossed over coming up with the name or changing the name to Outhouse. You went from
well, we just didn't have a name, and Outhouse was the original name, what we came up with in LA.
What?
Yep, that Bill and I was like, hey, we should have a band called Outhouse. It was like, yeah, that works. Not knowing we were gonna really move back to Kansas City and get a lot of shit for the Outhouse in Lawrence. So, which we did, because there was a guy that never came to us but was telling other people he was gonna, sue us or something because we had the name. It was like,
So yeah, I moved here from Iowa. I was playing on the road with a band, so technically I didn't really have a home. I was out on the road full time. My band played here. Christy came up and said he wanted a guitar player. He said he'd been in a band called Viper, and I knew Viper. I'd seen Viper albums, so I knew they were like a legit band that was out and about. But he was the lead singer, and he was sort of starting his own thing. And for a little while, it was unsure whether it was going to be Christy's Viper, and then eventually it just became the Christy Black Band, right? But they had our manager Eric Greif had us a deal with Enigma Records, so we were to write songs and go in the studio. So moved here and started writing, which was perfect. That's what I wanted to do. I just wanted to write songs. And loved Christy. We got along great. He was just a great character and a good dude, So we got along great, wrote some really cool songs together. Some of the other guys in the band were writing. So we put this album together, recorded it, and then like many album deals, it fell through, and then last minute they didn't want to do it, and so they backed out on the deal. But that was the first, my first band in Kansas City that I was here playing in Kansas City. And then from then, I started doing my own stuff. I'd always written instrumental stuff and guitar nerd kind of stuff. So I'm still doing that on the side, on my 4-track, in my bedroom by myself, writing tunes. And I put some stuff together and I did an EP. So put this stuff together, went to Chicago to record this EP called Warp Speed. And so that was my thing. Well, it was instrumental, it was guitar stuff, but I really wanted to play in a band with a vocalist. So that's when basically I got together with J.D. Begtal, the vocalist, Lance Logan, who was basically my bass player from the cover band days, Doug Sorensen, and we formed Monster. We wrote a lot of songs. We played a lot in JD's basement. We recorded tons of stuff down there, and I've actually put a couple things out We did a couple songs on a Woodland West compilation. Was that what it's? I can't remember what it was called. Yeah, High Plains Rock. That was it. So we did a couple songs on that. It was really good stuff. I mean, the band was kind of JD's voice was very Queensryche, Jeff Tate, Bruce Dickinson kind of a thing. So it was on the heavier side, but Lance was a real funky bass player, and I liked a lot of funky bluesy stuff. So we had some different sounding stuff at the time, and we got basically asked if we wanted to be managed by Chris Ellis, who had managed Banshee and got Banshee their record deal on Atlantic, the whole story there. So he started working with us and started shopping our stuff. But, as always, the shopping of the record, everybody kept turning us down. Honestly, if I look back, we were probably 3 years late with that band. Probably like Banshee was, right? I mean, if you really look like that Banshee, if they would have put out what they did 4 years before, they would have been huge, right? But it was just on the tail end of that stuff. So this would have been 89-ish, I guess, and basically for us, we were just kind of on the tail end of that. So nobody was really interested in that. But during that time, got to be friends with Chris Ellis, our manager, and I had my cassette of my EP, and he took that around and was getting some interest for that. And he said, "Hey, would you be interested in doing an instrumental record?" And at the time, I was totally into that. That was in the shred days, right, of all the Shrapnel stuff and the Mike Varney stuff and the McAlpine and Vinnie Moore and all those guys. And so I was doing stuff kind of in that vein. So I was totally hip to do that, and I was excited about doing that. And that was the next thing we did. And so that was the first real record that came out in 1990 was Woodpecker Stomp then. And that was, that was a real cool time. We, were in I was in all the guitar magazines. We got, the record was played on Z-Rock, which was really cool to hear it on the National Z-Rock thing. And, all these magazines, including like all the magazines in Japan, Young Guitar and Burn and all those magazines that, over here, you have a little blurb, but over there, the guitar magazines, they were like a Sears catalog, they're like huge. And you're like, even unknown guys here would have like 3-4 page spreads. And so I got in on that, to be, in the guitar thing over there, which was really awesome. Led to getting a record deal over in Japan after that. Eventually put out a record called Pawn Shop over there. But anyway, that was kind of the steps that were happening, and during that time, I was always shopping myself as a guitar player to try to get a guitar endorsement. Back then, that was everybody did, right? Everybody was trying to get an endorsement, So I did. I got a deal with Yamaha Guitars, and they put me on the road doing guitar clinics. So I traveled all over the country doing guitar clinics, played all the NAMM shows and that kind of stuff, which once again was perfect for a guitar geek like me, because that's all I wanted to do was play guitar and be around other guys that just wanted to play guitar, and so that's what we were doing. And then that led to my band, the Jeff Sheets Band, playing the instrumental stuff with Kent Burnham from Banshee, who I played with for many years in many bands and many versions, and just such a monster player. And Eddie Pruitt on bass, crazy funky bass player. So we would go, and that was back in the day when you could play guitar instrumental stuff, and we would like pack like the backstage. It's like there'd be 400 people in there to see 3 guys get up there and noodle around for a couple hours. That was the good times back then for guitar players.
So Mooncalf, if that's what we're kind of getting to, was it was probably formed in 90. It was Havoc is what I was in through high school. Yeah, and I was it was
high school stuff.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, and then I was in a band called Grimace. But Grimace was really great, super heavy band. It's and in fact, actually, our first show was at the Uptown Theater. I thought I had arrived, man. I was just like, dude, I'm playing in Uptown Theater. This is gonna be great, and get up there on the first song, broke a bass string. And so then I'm running around, we're playing with Banshee, right? And so I look at my case, I'm like, oh my God, how can I break a string? Number one, I don't have an extra string. So then I run up, Bill Westfall is sitting there and he's just like, aren't you supposed to be on stage? And I was like, yeah, dude, I just broke a string. And he was so genuine and cool, man. He's that dude that you could always, and I said this so many times about him. It's just, I would go years without talking to him. but it's just like every time we would meet up, it's just like, I just saw you the other day, man. You know, it was such a cool being. You know, yeah, great person. Yeah, I left Grimace, and you know, and I remember I was telling him because, like, you know, I've become friends with Carlos Gunn and Newberry Gunn, and man, and all those dudes treated me like family, you know, and not that Grimace didn't. It's nothing like that at all. But I spent a lot of time listening to what they were doing, and man, they were playing some really heavy, intricate, cool stuff. You know, like when you listen to like the actual music, and I think like it was, you know, for some like in the thrash scene, it was hard to cut. You know, there was like the whole, you know, they're kind of glammy and all that stuff. That was kind of the thing I was going for. Was probably like more of like a heavy metal kind of thing. And so, but and I did a reunion with Grimace, and it was at the Coliseum out there at Swope Park, and Mooncalf. Well, they were Mr. Bungle at the time, and they were looking to move on and have 2 guitar players because they had been operating as a 3-piece, and so ended up going down, man. And those guys, like, you know, they were doing some like really cool writing. It's like, you know, it was thrash, but it was like there was something more that was going on there. And so, that was in, I think they probably formed in '89. And then when they wanted to make that transition, I ended up catching the bass gig, and with Chris Fugit on drums, and Ron Fuller then moved to guitar, and Brian was lead guitar and singer.
Great.
Yeah.
Starting in '85, my best friend Ralph Brewer, who was a guitar player, we were in a cover band all through high school. We had gone to a show at the Uptown Theater. It was Savatage and a band from Scotland called Rogue Mail. And they were like Road Warrior meets Motorhead. And we were way into them because I was like super big Motorhead fan growing up. And we hung out, we were hanging out front, and ended up like talking to the band, and they came on. We were sitting on the bus with them drinking beer, and their label rep, this guy named Jay Valentine from, I think it was Mercury Records at the time, was sitting there, and we're talking about, you know, being in a band and what we want to accomplish and stuff. And he's like, you guys should just write your own stuff. Why are you doing that? And we were kind of like, why aren't we doing that? And that was it. It was like 1985, and we were like, that was like, okay, no more covers. We're just gonna write our own shit. So Ralph and I started Ragdoll in '85. And brought in a singer named Scott Enlow, and our bass player from our cover band, Brett, was the original bass player. And then we ended up bringing in Ian McAtee, who was the bass player from this punk band Gear that we knew from because we worked at the same record store. And we're like, well, Ian knows what he's doing. Like, Ian's been around. He can teach us. And that's, it was like, he was definitely like our fucking rock and roll Mr. Miyagi. He taught us a lot about writing our own songs. And then that lasted until, Ragdoll lasted until probably '88. And then we formed Channel Zero, and that was me, Ralph, and Ian. And then we did the High Plains record with Christy Black on vocals. We did 2 songs on that. And that was just, we knew that was only gonna be temporary with Christy doing it, because he had bigger and better things going on. So we recruited a friend of ours that we had met, Chris Ward, to sing for Channel Zero. And Channel Zero was, that's when things kind of started shifting from, because Ragdoll was, we looked glam, but we still kind of sounded like Zeppelin, Deep Purple at times. That was, we were more of a product. definitely more classic rocky sounding with a glammy look, whereas Channel Zero started kind of segueing into the whole kind of Guns N' Roses-y, you know, a little darker. And so Channel Zero ran from like 88 to at least like 93, I think, 92, 93. And it was definitely a shift from kind of brighter to darker. I started listening to a lot of like weird, like not so much goth, but there was these bands that I was listening to a lot of cowpunk and a lot of smidge of goth here and there, and then I started getting into like the Black Crowes and stuff like that. So it definitely started moving in a darker direction then.